Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Relentless Learning. It's Friday, noon Pacific time. I'm your host, Larry Apke. We do this every week and present two big ideas, one from myself and one from a special guest. And for those of you who have not been here and you're wondering why, Larry, did you invite me? Because I invited some folks. The reason is some of you I might want to have as guests as well. So if you have been a guest or you want to be a guest, one of the reasons why you might have been invited today. I hope you enjoy it today. I think we've got a great lineup today. This week's two big ideas. My special guest, Bill Lennan, will present the best team supervisors, managers, leaders willingly get uncomfortable to support their teams. And I'm going to present a series. I have a series of laws of agile transformation. I presented the first one last week. I'm going to present the second one this week. And next week, pretty excited because my special guest will be Steve Ropa. I've worked with Steve before. He's going to talk about the biggest reasons for technical excellence. And I'm going to talk about the third law of agile transformation. I want to remind folks that this Relentless Learning has a sponsor, and that sponsor is something that's called the VUCA MBA. And for those of you who are not familiar with the VUCA MBA or the term VUCA, VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It is a description of the world we live in today. It was actually brought to us from the military some time ago. There's a whole bunch of other acronyms out there. Seems like there's some kind of arms race for creating new acronyms. There's new ones coming out all the time. There's TAMP and BANI and others. But basically, what all of these acronyms are talking about is that the world is changing. The world is different, somehow different than it used to be. It's more complex, it's more volatile, things move faster. How do we, as human beings, how do we as companies not only survive in this VUCA world, but how do we thrive in this VUCA world is what I'm about. And that's what the VUCA MBA is about. MBA standing, in this case, Mindset for Business Agility. If we're going to be successful businesses in the VUCA world, we need to understand some of the concepts of agile and agility because that's what's going to help us not only survive but thrive in this VUCA world. Also have some helpful links. I have also put those in the comments section. So for those of you who have taken it before, who've been here before and have joined us on a regular basis, you know this, but for anybody who's new, you can put things in the comment section. If you have any questions or things about the presentations, anything you want to ask me or my guest, and then we can take those things from the comment section and we can actually show them on the screen. We can actually address those. So I want you to keep that in mind as we're going through things. But I also, in the comment section, put in a whole bunch of links that I hope you will find helpful. They're listed here just to remind me the things that I posted, but a couple of things I would just want to draw your attention to. The VUCA MBA class is really for businesses, but I have decided as kind of a pilot to try it for the general public. There's a link there. It's scheduled currently for December 12th through 14th. If you join us early, the normal cost is $300 for the 3 days of training. You join us early, it's $250. I think it's a pretty good bargain. Most of the people, we've polled them and said, what kind of value do you get from this as an individual? And they rate it as $3,000 or more. So I think the investment is worth it, but that's up to you. So that link is there, my website link, my email. Join our mailing list. I'm not going to spam you with a bunch of stuff. I'm going to send you reminders of who our guests are so that you remember to show up. I've got a ton of content out on YouTube. I encourage folks to do it. A lot of the classes I've taught in the past, podcasts, previous Relentless Learnings. My LinkedIn, of course, if you're not connected with me as yet, then please do. And you can get on my calendar. There's a link there. Set up a half-hour Zoom chat if you're interested in talking about VUCA world, agility, etc. Great. And if you want to see some of the testimonials and things I've had, literally thousands of people take my class. Some of them have, in fact, a good number of them have something nice to say about it. And there's probably some folks here who are joining us live and will join us from the recording who probably have experienced the class at some point in time. I want to segue on to the part of the show where we start talking about big ideas. I'm going to bring out Bill in a second, but I want to talk about my big idea. I probably won't take all of my 10 minutes allotment, so I'll probably give Bill a little bit extra time this morning or this afternoon. We'll see what happens. Some of you know I came out with a book recently, and that book was called Apke's Golden Rule of Agile. And the Golden Rule of Agile is one of the presentations that I had originally. I think it was the first one, where I say basically the Golden Rule of Agile is we deliver the optimal value to our customers in the shortest time possible, trying to distill what this Agile thing is all about. It's not perfect, but it works pretty well. It ended up being a book because at the time I was actually writing a book about Apke's laws of Agile transformation. I have about 9 or 10 of them, I think, at last count. But when I started writing the book, I actually started writing a chapter on Golden Rule and ended up writing a small book on it. So I don't want to push it. We don't make, as consultants, we don't make a whole bunch of money on books, but if you're interested in Apke's Golden Rule of Agile, I think it's a pretty interesting book, and I'm very proud of it. It just came out not too long ago. So while I was writing these laws of Agile transformation, I went back on history and I said, how long have I had this thing out there, and when did I actually put it out in the public? And I actually, of all places, found it on Twitter. I think they call it X now. I am now an ex-Twitter person, but back in the day, I used to tweet things, and I tweeted out on September 24th, 2018, what I refer to as Apke's second law of Agile transformation. The actual success of your transformation is inversely proportional to the number of people claiming success in public. And the reason for this quote unquote insight was I was working actually I've worked at a bunch of different companies, so I don't want anybody to try to track it down, but I was working at a company that was known for, in public, having one of the best Agile success stories at the time. Now, this is obviously many years ago, because I wrote this in 2018, and it was prompted by some experiences I had previous to that. So it was a long time ago. I remember when they interviewed me to become a coach, I asked them a question. My first question was, why are you even interviewing me? You are publicly one of the biggest Agile success stories. And as I started to actually unwind the real story behind this successful Agile transformation, I found out there were a lot of things that kind of left to be desired. One of them is that the transformation itself wasn't very large. It only happened when the company was very small. It's a large company these days, but the company itself was pretty small. I think the total number of developers was something in the neighborhood of 50 to 100, which for a lot of Agile coaches and people in the Agile world, that's not a huge transformation. Again, as you started to unwind it, it just became more and more that this wasn't really that successful transformation. When I went and worked with them, I realized that the transformation really didn't go as smoothly and as well and as deep, et cetera, as it claimed to be. And this came up to me recently because I think there's a lot of folks referring to something that I see online as the death of Agile. And the word Agile sometimes has a bad connotation. I talk with a lot of coaches on this show and outside of this show, and we kind of hand wring over this concept that is Agile dying. There's a lot of Agile coaches who have been let go. The famous Capital One, where they showed all the Scrum Masters at the door not too long ago. What's happening in the world of Agile? And it brings to mind this second law of Agile transformation, though it may be tangential and not completely directly related. It reminds me, and I put in the comments, a link to a website that I think talks a little bit about this kind of concept. And that website is, the link is in there, but it's a website that has information for decision makers considering SAFe. Now, I know that in certain circles, talking smack about SAFe is, tantamount to heresy. People are lining up on each side. And that's not what I'm attempting to do. But what I found with SAFe, I'm not a SAFe person. I've been pretty public about that. And I'm not against somebody who is a SAFe person. I have my reasons, and I'm sure they have theirs. But what I noticed for SAFe in particular, and this is just an example, it's not the only one, is that they claim a lot of success with companies on their website. I was just there before the show today. I took a look at who do they claim as success stories. And I looked at this, I forget what the website's name is, but the one that has information about SAFe implementations and ones that didn't go so well. And the interesting thing is that the majority of companies that SAFe is that are failures, quote unquote failures on this list, with a history of people who've done them. And I'm familiar with the story about the Air Force in particular, because Nicholas, I can't remember his last name, starts with a C. I have to look it up, but he sent out a memo. We're not going to do SAFe, but the Air Force story is still on the SAFe website. So how can you publicly proclaim something when the person who actually was in charge, I think he was the CTO at the time, or CIO, of the Air Force, claims that it didn't give you what they claim it, gives you, and to me that's problematic. And I see it a lot. I think sure it's rampant everywhere else. This is where I spend my time. So for me, it's important, and it's probably my bias because that's all I see. There's a lot of people who claim victory, I suppose, when it doesn't really happen. But I see it in the Agile world, and it concerns me because I think that there's so many people claiming so many wonderful things in the Agile world publicly and very, very voraciously and loudly. And then when people start to do Agile transformations, or people buy certifications, and the C-level folks don't find these wonderful success stories that everybody else were promised, I think it gives Agile a bad name. And I think we have to be careful. I think we in the Agile world, I talk a lot about the Agile world, and I'm sure that with the guests here, I can't see who's all here, but I'm assuming that there's some coaches here. I think we have to be very careful with that. I had a conversation this morning with an Agile coach who's been around for a long time. I have a great deal of respect for, and we talked about that, how there are so many people getting certified to be coaches, but do they really have the experience? So before getting down that rabbit hole, next week I'm going to talk about Apke's third law of Agile transformation, which does talk about certifications. And I as my ex-boss used to say, I expect it to be spicy for some people, because I'm going to make a claim about certifications that some folks are not going to appreciate. So you might want to stay tuned for that. But we have to be careful what we're telling the rest of the world about what Agile can and cannot do, what we as coaches can and cannot do, what frameworks can and cannot do. So that's my big idea. So if you're a C-level executive and you're making those decisions, tune in next week, or if you get this in recording, go to the next recording, because I'm going to talk about not only what some folks are looking for, but what you shouldn't be looking for, what you should be looking for when you're hiring somebody to work on your Agile transformation. I've got some ideas. They're probably not perfect, but they may be helpful to some. So that's my big idea, not quite as big probably as Bill's big idea. Joining me now is our special guest this week, Bill Lennan. Hey, Bill, how you doing?
Good, thanks. How you doing?
I am doing wonderful. I'm glad that you joined us. We met through
Thank you.
mutual friends. We had some wonderful conversations, and I'm so happy that you could join us today. I'm going to start off with the introduction of Bill and what I would consider the kind of bio that is written. So I'm just going to read it. So if it sounds
Of
like I'm
course,
reading,
be my guest. Sure.
but Bill was raised on the islands and diversely educated, and he's always focused on solving human as well as technical problems. And over the span of his tech career, he has built products, teams, and solutions for mobile, recruiting, e-commerce, social media, and now education, which we're going to talk about briefly in a second. He has helped companies ranging from Google and Walmart to hotels and restaurants. Building high functioning teams has been fundamental to Bill's success. And you're also the founder, you can see it here on your title, founder of 40% Better. 40% Better, I know what it is, but I'm sure that the folks here would like to know, what is
Sure.
40% Better?
Yeah. So 40% Better scratches the itch and answers the question that I was given repeatedly throughout my career by executives and peers who said, we gave you a task, we gave your team a task that we thought was impossible, and you guys delivered it before anybody conceived of it being possible to do that. How? Teach us what you've done. And at the time, I didn't have the language. I needed the help of my very smart partner to break it down into words and make this into something that's a consistent, repeatable process that anybody else can learn. 40% Better is actually a reminder. At one of the companies I was at when I started, the first day on the job, the CTO said, by the way, I'm giving you the worst performing team in the company. Good luck. Mm-hmm. Great start there. I said, thank you. I appreciate the challenge. And 6 months later, he pulled me into his office and said, I don't know what you've done, but your team, and by the way, my cat wants to join this conversation.
That's good. I've got a dog back here. So if you see Allie running around, that wouldn't be unusual.
He said, your team has become the best performing team in the company. They're getting 40% better coding throughput now than they did when you started. What have you done in the last 6 months? And I didn't know how to answer that question at the time, but again, now I do. This is what we're all about, is helping companies, leaders have amazing engagement. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, it's the performance and the throughput and the ROI of doing this kind of thing.
Yeah, just briefly, I think you and I probably know this, and some of the folks who are listening, they're pretty savvy. They probably know this, but I want you to talk specifically, because I know your expertise is in employee engagement. Mm-hmm. Tell me the reasons why I want my employees engaged. Just a few things.
Yeah. So there's two big ones for me, right? Number one is so much better productivity. There's a bunch of research out there about employee engagement, and right now, the best numbers that you will see are that 25% of your employees are engaged. Mm-hmm. There's other data that says it's as low as 15% of your employees are engaged. Maybe I'm selfish, and I'll admit it, but I want everybody on my team to be engaged, because when everybody's engaged, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can do. And as the guy that's helping the people make that happen, one of the things that I've learned over the years has been that when my team start performing better and better, the executives want to give us more stuff. Like, I can go and say, hey, my team wants to work remote. And they're, okay, fine. My team wants new computers. Okay, fine. We want to learn something, right? When our team becomes high performing, everybody wants to keep that train moving forward, right? And the team itself is more confident, right? And they feel better appreciated. It's great ROI.
And you said there were two things. You said ROI. What was the second thing?
Oh, nobody takes. Yeah. So because the engagement is so high, nobody takes mental health days. Right? Like, people just don't take, people, They take vacations, they travel around the world, they have babies, they do all that stuff. But the stress level of people on the team, which is directly attached to being disengaged from work, goes away.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my teams, we had a guy who he really wanted to travel around the world, and he didn't have that many vacation days. And we worked out a way for him to travel around the world and stay working remote, contributing, doing everything we needed. He took a year. And everybody in the team was cool with it. Everybody was happy about it. The executives were happy. I was happy. It worked really, really well. And that's the kind of thing that you want your team to be able to do. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think it's great, Bill, and I know that theme is going to come up in future Relentless Learning sessions, because it's such an important thing, I think. But you have brought with us, as all our guests do, a big idea, something that you think is going to help folks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get myself out of the way, and you're going to present your big idea. You got, as we talked about with all guests, you got about 10 minutes, and take it away, Bill.
Let me start my countdown timer so that I don't run out of time here, because that would be horrible. Give me 1 second. Let me get this thing going. Start. That way I got a visual reminder. Cool. So my name is Bill Lennan. One of the things that's really critical for everything that's going to happen in the rest of this conversation, and this is one of the fundamental things that's run throughout my career, is that team leads have to be able to get comfortable being uncomfortable in service of their teams. When my partner started deconstructing what it was that I was doing, and my partner, by the way, is an occupational therapist with a background in mental health, and she was very curious about how I was getting my teams to perform. She started interviewing me and asking very detailed questions, kind of like a product manager or product owner would be doing if they were thinking about a feature they wanted to build. She was asking me all these questions about how I was able to make things happen. And consistently what came out was I was willing to be uncomfortable and do things because it would help my team. And that really became the starting point for everything. The nice thing about it is that typically things are the most uncomfortable the very first time you do it. And every time after that you do it, it gets easier and easier and easier as our skill level improves. So if you aren't willing to be uncomfortable in service of your team, that has a real negative impact on what it's possible for you to do from a leadership position. And this is, my definition of leadership is A, you've got people reporting to you. B, they're a dotted line. Or C, you're just an individual contributor, but you want to help make things happen. The way that we look at the how of doing this, right, is I'm a huge fan of consistent, repeatable processes. Larry's all about Agile, and depending on how you want to do Agile is a consistent, repeatable process for achieving better throughput, better customer satisfaction with the software you're building, right? So when we're thinking about this in terms of engagement with the teams, it's having a context that makes sense, understanding the skills that you need that tie into that context, and then being able to break those skills down into really tiny increments. Obviously, you have to learn and you have to practice those increments and leverage the compound interest of getting 1% better every day. I look for really tiny improvements. It's kind of the same thing in the Agile world, being a Scrum Master, you want to be able to have little small process improvements. And it's like peeling an onion, right? You get a little bit better every day. So in this particular world where we're talking about context, it's engagement, but employee engagement actually has pieces below it, right, that we want to make sure we pull in. First and foremost is we want to improve the psychological safety of our team. And whether you're explicitly the team leader or you're just somebody on the team that wants to be able to help, we as individuals can help other people have better psychological safety. We can do this by listening better. We can do this by asking better questions. We can do this by not criticizing. There's a whole bunch of different ways that we teach people how to build that psychological safety for other people on their team. And this was one of the keys to my success. Was I helped the people on the team feel safer, and they then were willing to be more vulnerable, and they gave better quality work. And at the end of the day, we're going back to ROI and how's that all play out. They need to have the psychological safety to do that level of work. The performance that they're putting out, as I mentioned earlier, it makes the executive leadership in the company really, really happy. And the people I'm focusing on here, by the way, are the first level team leads. And again, their first level team leads, either they've got the title, they've got a dotted line, or they're just somebody on the team who wants to be able to have an impact. Maybe they're thinking about being a leader in the future and they want to start practicing early. So that's the context for really helping your people to operate better. And it's what are the values and priorities that you're moving towards, right? It's always about what's the values and priorities that are drawing you forward. When we talk about skills, I think in terms of skills, like I think about math, right? Everybody here knows how to do math. Math is a great example of incremental learning. Nobody does math. You don't jump into calculus, right? There's a bunch of stuff you have to learn before you can get to there. And so we learn these tiny increments, and they're things that we don't even think about anymore. I don't think about doing multiplication in my head. I don't think about understanding algebraic formulas. When I look at something that's geometry, I understand what's going on there, right? It's because it's been built up in these little tiny increments. And that's the same way to teach people how to have great engagement. You can't just go to a team and say, I want you to be more engaged, because you haven't done all the things that allows them to step into that place. And you also couldn't go to some 4-year-old who doesn't know how to count and say, do algebraic equations. It's not going to happen. You have to be able to build up in these little tiny consistent steps that people can practice and get good at, and they will move forward into that place that you want. It took me 6 months to get a 40% improvement in my team's coding throughput, because they had to baby step forward, right? And different people on the team had to baby step in different ways. And so we have to be able to understand that, right? The skill areas, there's 3 big areas. The first one is getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And again, this was the fundamental thing that really allowed me to do all this stuff, because first time I did any of this, it was not easy and it wasn't comfortable for me. It was quite hard. But you have to have the emotional resilience and the emotional management. And again, this is a skill set that anybody can learn. You just have to learn it, understand it, and practice it consistently. The second one is interpersonal effectiveness. There's a whole bunch of nuance around communication and understanding communication, and when and where and how to communicate effectively with people. That opens up all kinds of doors for us. But if we don't know that we don't know those things exist, we won't do it and we won't practice it. And so a lot of this is breaking that down into structures that people can leverage so that they can be better at communicating, because humans communicate, right? That's what we got to be able to do. The starting point is going to be uncomfortable. I used to have really bad social anxiety, and I use this process to get over my fear of talking with strangers, to get over my fear of talking with people on my team, to get over my fear of presenting. And now I do public speaking, right? And it's been this same process of a little bit uncomfortable in service of my team, a little bit uncomfortable in service of my team, a little bit uncomfortable in service of my team, right? And then one day I'm going and I'm pitching our CEO and telling him that we need to change major business processes because my team understands things that the executives don't understand yet, right? And he buys it and says yes. So we have to get really good at interpersonal effectiveness. And the third area is critical thinking. And again, Agile, a lot of critical thinking in there, a lot of problem solving skills. I'm a huge fan of outlier data. One of the things that I learned through all the years in my software career is that the data on the outer end of the bell curve is actually quite fascinating, and oftentimes will lead us in really valuable directions for better product design, better product improvement. But also it helped me to understand better how to help my team to be happier, more engaged, and better performing, right? I did a lot of things where rather than kind of following the middle of the bell curve standard, I went to the outliers in terms of knowledge to help my team operate much, much better. So that's kind of three big buckets of skills that we talk about. And again, the first one is always, you got to be willing to be uncomfortable. And I've had a lot of years of practice of being uncomfortable. And that's kind of how I'm able to do this, right? Practice, you got to start small and achievable and only a little bit uncomfortable. Recognize you're going to be building competence over time. Hey, that's 10 minutes. Awesome. And then add layers just like we do in math, right? You started off, my kids start off at 4 just doing simple math, simple counting, right? And then they leverage those improvements. My older son now does some kind of weird physics calculus I completely don't understand. But it's because he leveraged the improvements and built on his skills, right? And I think the last piece of this is to recognize the gains you've made and don't worry about the what you still have to move forward, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm really happy that I'm not afraid of talking to strangers anymore. I'm not really worried about, I don't know how to do a big TED talk, right? Mm-hmm. That's makes that achievable and comfortable.
Well, you kind of did a TED talk, right?
What's that?
You kind of did a TED talk just now.
Like, kind of, yeah. I need to, okay, I got to put that on my future goals list. Yeah,
well,
yeah.
I think that's how long they run. Don't they run about 10, 15 minutes? Is it for a TED talk?
It's I think they're 15.
15, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so TED Talk Lite today.
Exactly, yeah. This was the TEDx Lite.
There you go.
Thank you. Yeah.
You talked about psychological safety as one of the things that's really important, and I think you and I both know this comes from Google's Project Aristotle. Do you have any of the other things as you're going through from the Project Aristotle? It's one of the topics I want to talk about in the future. I'm just curious about, do you apply those? Or
I don't know Aristotle. I'm gonna have to go look at it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, good.
Yeah.
Join us. We'll talk. We'll have to talk about it in the future. Join us, because
definitely.
That's the thing they found, Bill.
Yeah.
What they did is they did a study of all their highest performing teams.
Yep.
And they asked themselves the question, what's different about them? And right. I'm not going to give the whole thing away because I think it's a great talk for another. But the number one thing they found was psychological safety.
Right. And
so you found it independently, which is even actually a little bit more special, I would guess. I just thought, I almost assumed that you were familiar with it when you started talking about this term, psychological safety.
No, the background on this, my dad was in the military, and he always said that his teams operated really well when he took good care of them and gave them the space to operate well, and that was a leader's job.
Yeah.
And that the things his teams were doing, he couldn't do on his own. He could, even if he stepped in to take one of the roles on the team, he still needed the whole team to accomplish what it was they were doing. And so I just always assumed that the best use of my time as leader was to help my team operate more effectively. I didn't know when I started off that I was helping them have psychological safety. Like, that wasn't a term that I was thinking about. It wasn't until my partner started really breaking down for me exactly what I was doing to little tiny pieces. And and then was able to say, oh, by the way, the reason this works is your team has better psychological safety. That's why they're willing to be more vulnerable. That's why you get better ideas out of them. That's why you get shy people to suddenly become vocal, right? Mm-hmm. Because you have to build that environment that people can then operate into. And then they give you great work.
Right.
You know,
I want to remind, thanks, Bill. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah. I want to remind the folks who are here live with us, if you have any questions, you can certainly put them into the comments, and we can put them up on the screen, and we can ask Bill. So if you have anything for Bill or myself, we can do that. While I'm waiting, sometimes we get a bunch of questions, sometimes we don't. Don't know what's going to happen today, but you talked about this concept that I'm pretty interested in, outliers. Talking about materials, it reminds me of Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers.
Right.
When you're using that term, are you using the term in the same way that Gladwell would, or?
The fundamental idea for outliers, it's they're way on the outside edge of the bell curve, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, I always think about that in terms of data analysis, because that's where we end up going ultimately, right? Crossing the chasm is a different way of talking about that, where the early adopters in something are on the bleeding edge.
Yeah.
And it takes time for that to reach the mainstream, right? After the military, my dad got into academia for a while, and he had an email address, right? Now, he had an email address when it was still all DARPA, and it was all school-based, and normal people couldn't have email, right? He was super early adopter. Everybody has email today. Right. Everybody has multiple email addresses, right? He was an outlier at the early days, and he didn't realize that there would be a long-term value in this. Right? Nobody saw the context of what happens when everybody in the world can have an email address, right? How does that change the world? There's all these different contexts where I think about, well, what are the outliers doing?
Yeah.
Right. What are the people on the edge doing? And it's not to say that stuff's always right or better. It's just, it's there, and it's educational.
Right.
Right. And I want to see because I'm curious, I want to see the breadth of possibility. I don't want to be stuck in one place. Right. When I was at Google, the project that I was working on, I had 100+ people at Google tell me that it was impossible to do, technically and legally. And they were convinced they were right. And I knew from other data that they were wrong, because I had looked across the whole span, and I'm like, well, okay, that's your opinion. I get that it's your opinion, but I've got this other data here that actually shows that it's neither illegal nor technically impossible.
Yeah. It's always interesting. I think there's a phrase about that. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's something like those of you who are telling us we can't do it are annoying those of us who are out there doing it.
Exactly. Yeah.
We do have a question from Raluca. She's saying, Bill, what are some of the things you did with your team to increase efficiency?
So, boy, there's a whole bunch of things. One is I made sure they felt appreciated. Like I gave them credit for everything that happened that our team did. Like, when we're doing the executive presentations about new features coming out, I specifically said, oh, here's who worked on this, here's who worked on that. Like, I didn't take credit for anything, right? It's all naming the people in front of the executives who did all the work. The flip side to it is when there was ever a problem, something was wrong, it was my fault, right? I hadn't thought through something, and that's why this broke, right? So this is the, back to being willing to be uncomfortable. Yeah. I have to be willing to uncomfortable, take all the arrows and give all the credit, right?
It sounds, Bill, a lot like you mentioned your dad a couple times in the military.
Yeah.
It sounds a lot like what I perceive, not being in the military, but from what I hear about the military, that a true leader will do such things.
Right. Exactly.
And I always make a distinction between leadership and management. And I would think, not to put words in your mouth, but I want to hear what you have to say about it. I mean, a manager is going to take the credit, a leader's not. A manager is going to deflect responsibility, a leader is going to accept it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think of it in terms of the role that you want to take on as a person rather than your title.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. You can have a title of whatever, but it's what's your behavior, right? How do you operate? The other thing is, I always went to bat for my team with, the chain of command to get things that they wanted. Mm-hmm. And I figured out how to make that work successfully when there was friction. And the team likes it when you do that, right? Like the team wants to trust that their leadership will do hard things that the team can't make happen themselves. Mm-hmm. Right? I was at one company where everybody was complaining their computers were slow, and they had all asked for new computers and were told they couldn't have them. I went to talk to the VP of Eng and said, hey, I'd like new computers for my team. And he said, it's not in the budget. Sorry, you can't have them. And so I said, okay, thank you. I appreciate understanding that. Went back, got with the team, figured out a way to have this be a budgetary argument. And mm-hmm. I put it into dollars. And I got another meeting with the VP of Eng and said, hey, I want to give you some new data that I think will change your mind. At least you'll be better informed.
Right.
And when I gave him the financials of how many man hours that we were losing because of slow computers versus getting new hardware, he said, oh my God, I had no idea. You get new computers first thing tomorrow morning. I can't get them to you any faster. And how come nobody told me this before? Right. And again, the team was they were more efficient because they had faster computers, but their level of trust for me as their leader went up a ton because I've been able to accomplish something that really helped them out.
Right.
And that's the thing is, being willing to be uncomfortable to serve them gets them to give us better performance.
Yeah. And there's another thing in my mind, because I've run into similar situations in my career. And the one of the things that always goes through my mind is, if I don't give them, it's not a huge thing generally. I mean, mm-hmm. I remember one instance where somebody wanted a third monitor, and it was like pulling teeth with procurement. And you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to waste more money talking about this than it would cost. I mean, this is some years ago when monitors weren't dirt cheap, but and I got it for the person, because in my mind is, this person thinks they need this. Now, whether they do or don't is immaterial. Their reality is, I need this, and now they've got an excuse.
Exactly.
I would have been faster, but you didn't give me the third monitor, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Let me get it. Let me remove the excuses. I don't want to say, like a mean guy or something. Let me remove the excuses. If you think this is in your way, let me get it out of your way. Even if I don't agree with what you're saying, at least going forward, you no longer have that as an excuse. Does that jive with your experience at all?
Yeah. No, it's not big, complicated things that the team typically wants. Like, in the grand scheme of the world, that monitor, even when monitors were expensive, is cheap compared to the person hours, right? That you're saving, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure that everything that I can that's a friction that I get it removed as fast as I can. I probably can't get anybody a new car, right? Yeah. But people don't usually ask for new cars as a way to move forward, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's usually smaller things than you would imagine. Real quick, another question in the chat, Bill. Yeah. Do you believe in one-on-ones or open door? How often do you think one-on-ones should be held?
Oh, of course. Yeah, definitely. So I did one-on-ones every week with everybody on the team. And they were short. They were like 15 minutes, maybe 20 on the schedule. And that was it. If we went longer, I left a 30-minute time block clear on my calendar, but I only scheduled 15 with them. the reason that I did this, number one, was I wanted to get the relationship with that individual to be as open as possible. Because one of the things that I noticed early in my career was that I could have people who were really communicative and had a great relationship with me. And as soon as we went into the team meeting, they shut down or they operated in a different way. And I wanted to be able to make those things congruent. And as soon as I saw that there was that problem, then I'd start to work on how do I make everything work really, really well. So for me, one-on-ones are incredibly valuable. Okay.
It's all right. We lost your video for a second, but
okay.
Just wrap. We can
I don't
wrap
know
up.
I don't know why my camera's not happy right now.
This is the beauty of live TV. We just lost Bill, but we were getting ready to wrap up anyway. So we'll give Bill a second or two to join. If not, I want to remind people just a little bit before we close today. Happens every Friday at noon Pacific. I appreciate the folks who join us every week. I want you to know that if you find this valuable, please invite others who you feel might get some benefit from it and join us. I look forward to next week when my friend Steve Ropa and I are going to have this session. My thanks to Bill. Sorry, for some reason the technology stopped working for us. But I want to say thanks to Bill and thank you to the folks for being here. Please join us again and have a wonderful weekend, everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.